Good evening, everyone. Going to give it just a moment for people to trickle in, but you will see a poll launch in a minute. And so if you don't mind taking a moment just to fill that in, and like I said, we'll get started in just a minute. You'll have seen that poll just come up. Okay. I see 6:01 p.m. Mountain Time, 8:01 Eastern. So we're going to go ahead and start. But for if you're anything like my students or like me, it's been a really long week and a long month already, even though it's not even mid-March yet. So take a couple breaths and just kind of ease your way into this. This is meant to be a helpful and not anxiety-inducing session at all. My name is Tal Kitron. I work as a tutor, mostly doing ACT, SAT, PSAT prep. And then I also work as an executive function coach, which is what we're going to talk about today. Been with the Appleruth company for about 11 years now. And I'm coming to you today from Colorado, moved here from Atlanta about 7 years ago. So all my tutoring is done via Zoom. Same with EF coaching, right? All online these days. If you just came in, you'll see a poll come up and you can just fill that one out. We'll have another short one at the end. If you have questions along the way today, please put them in the Q&A and I'll make sure I get to them. I think our presentation today should take 40-ish, 45 minutes, and then we'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end. Generally, we also do send out the slides to register, or the presentation to registrants at the end of the week. So I'm sure I'll get that question, but I do believe on Friday, so probably tomorrow, this presentation will get sent out to you. So let's talk about what EF is, what executive function skills are. Well, what they are is a set of processes. We all have them in various levels. It's a spectrum. And we need these processes and these functions to cognitively control our behavior, which includes managing yourself and your resources, selecting and successfully monitoring behaviors that facilitate attainment of chosen goals. So we set a goal, and then executive functions help us plan and prioritize and work to achieve that goal. So instead of impulsively acting, we use our executive functioning skills to think through solutions and think about the way we're thinking. And as I said, like adults can benefit from executive function coaching, right? None of us are perfect. We have them in various levels, but they're skills. And naturally, they will develop and improve over time as you grow up. But you can also hone these skills individually and, of course, with the help of a mentor. But we're here today to just kind of discuss what they are. And I'm going to give you guys some tips for like coming into AP exam and final exam seasons. So again, I mentioned it's a spectrum. So everyone has these skills. Some might be really strong with their planning ability. But then when it comes to time management, they actually kind of falter. And then we lose, points on tests because we haven't spent enough time studying, even though we planned to study the night before. Right? Built into that would be impulse control and self-regulation and self-monitoring, right? How do we engineer our environment so there are fewer distractions? And then just thinking about what's coming. So prioritizing the harder stuff and getting that out of the way first, maybe. And some students are really good at that, and others are going to procrastinate. But honing these skills and identifying which ones are weaker for you and which ones are naturally stronger will absolutely help you prepare for and succeed on the finals that I'm sure are coming up in a month or two, and then AP exams. Many of us have a lot of those this month and next even. So we're going to talk about metacognition, which is a big word for thinking about how you do what you do, thinking about the way that you think. And to have consistent success, we need to be self-reflective, not just about failures, but also about successes. I get a lot of students who come into test prep and they say immediately, I'm not a good test taker. I'm a slow reader. I'm bad at test taking. And we have to reframe that, right? Well, what about, I'm sure you've had some good test taking experiences. Maybe you took AP Lang, you got a great score on that test. What strategies did you use that time that worked? How did they help you reach your goal? And what would you repeat next time? maybe what else would you do and what wouldn't you do, right? So obviously we can take away things that went well and also that didn't, but I like to focus on it from a lens of success and positive visualization. We have to acknowledge if we've, failed on occasion or things haven't gone to plan, but you also want to be positive and reflect in a positive light, right? Don't be harsh on yourself when thinking about how do I change my planning or my EF skills generally. So when thinking about our thinking, we want to know our patterns, right? How, so if I feel like I'm a bad test taker, like why? Am I running out of time? Is it free response rather than multiple choice? Is it just math or is it humanities as well? Um, are longer tests harder for me or shorter tests? And then based on that, maybe we need to modify how we prepare, right? All these questions, we're coming from a lens of curiosity as well. Where should I prepare? Is my study environment good? Am I doing it like far enough beforehand and revisiting it before the test? Am I setting up good amounts of time, long blocks, but not too long? We'll talk about how to study and what are kind of some efficient methods. And then other things like maybe we have a pattern of being super overconfident. I've got a few students who are like that, and they make careless errors and move too fast. Or maybe we're underconfident, and that way, because of that, we overthink. I've got students like that too. Or maybe we know, hey, I think I'm going to get a C, and I got a C. Might be right on target. Whatever you find as you think through your patterns, be willing to shift. If the pattern that you have is not working, it's going to be tough to break, but you need to, right? We got to shift and create a new pattern that does work. So something we need to always do is establish goals. And so that's something I do as a coach, right? I'll help my students set a goal, whether that's test prep or just an EF coaching session. And so for each final exam, we want to think about what grade do I need to get? What's my target to get to this GPA, right? Whether I want to boost it from a 2.9 to a 3.3 or a 3.6 to a 3.8, or just maintain it at what it is. Got to set goals, and they should be specific, measurable, right? We're actually calculating what grade we need to get on this test to achieve the goal, because that will inform our preparation. So as an example, maybe we're shooting for an A or a B in every class. Well, in AP World, I currently have a very high B, 88.4. I just need a 92 to get an A, but I do need to get that A. So that'll put in a lot of effort because I'm right on the cusp. And if I don't get that 92 plus, I finish with a B. Environmental science, super high A. I could get a F basically and still receive an A for the class. So it's not like I'm going to ignore it completely, but less important, less time, less energy and effort than AP World, that's for sure. All right, and then I'm in honors algebra 2. I've got an 84. It's very unlikely I can get it up to an A. I mean, I think if I get 100 plus extra credit, but that's not happening. But I have to be careful I don't drop to a C, so I still need to get like a B-ish on this test. Going to get some time, more than environmental science, but maybe not as much as AP World. And then honors Spanish is, my goal is to get B's or above. I really need to focus on that because an 80 could very easily drop down to a C. So that would be a test that we focus on and spend a lot of energy and time studying for. So another aspect of executive function skills, a big one, is prioritization. It kind of ties in with planning and procrastination. And you can do a certain level of procrastination and it's not like the end of the world, but we need to figure out, where is it costing me? And if it is, how do we shift it? So the thing we need to do is identify critical tasks, what are the most important, highest priority, and then allocate more time initially and in general to those. So we got, let's say we got 4 AP tests in a matter of a couple weeks, right? And then same with finals or more even. So think to yourself, are there tests and classes you feel pretty confident on and don't need to spend as much time on? Don't lie to yourself. But if you think, man, I'm really doing well with this, I'm confident and comfortable, trust yourself. And then by the same token, if there are tests that deserve extra attention because the score is important, I don't want to drop down from 80 to lower, then we got to acknowledge that as well. Those are the things that will require more time. right? So it really, it's easier than it seems. It can just be overwhelming when you look at it as like a broad, oh man, plan, prioritize, organize, all this stuff. But it really comes down to just being structured, being organized, and just like attention to detail, right? If you know what classes you have and where the test, when the tests are, then you have a much better sense of how to plan. If you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants and thinking, man, I think this test is Tuesday, the next one's Wednesday, and then Friday, you're in trouble because you're not going to be able to schedule your work time or your downtime. So for each test, right, whether that's throughout the year or an AP or a final or whatever, or a project, craft your plan and treat every subject differently and think about how much time do I really need for this, right? And break that down. If it's a presentation, how much time do I need for my first group meeting? How much time do I need for my slides? How much time do I need to rehearse? And then how to study. We're going to talk a lot about that in these slides later on today. When to study. So if you've got 3 tests back to back to back, right? You don't want to do everything the night before. You want to spread it out and then revisit. One of the harder things, and it comes with experience, is estimating how much time everything will take. Some people are really good at that, and others, for various reasons, plan for an hour, but it takes 2 hours, or it could be the other way around, which would be better, right? But think about before you're crafting your plan, and before you plan, or before you begin your review, make sure that you have thought about your plan and really kind of projected what it's going to look like. Just like when you write an essay, you don't want to just dive in, you want to sketch it out first. This is making an outline for ourselves. Motivation is something that's intrinsic for a lot of students. I have a lot of my students who are just naturally motivated. They want to get a high score on the test, on the ACT, because they want to get into a good school and they just have this internal motivation. But not everyone has that, and they have it in various levels. So we can help, like as a coach, but also, I mean, as parents, sometimes it falls on deaf ears, right? If your student's like a sophomore, junior, senior, like a lot of the ones I'm working with. But coming from a tutor or a mentor or a coach, it's really helpful and important to help your student set a goal, right? If it's an AP, am I aiming for a 4 or a 5, right? Or would I be happy with just getting a 3 or above? Write that down, declare your intention, and positively visualize the score you want to achieve. We'll talk about finals and getting information from your teacher and the syllabus, but know how many on a test you can miss and still get an A if it's that kind of test, right? Which like the SAT and ACT are not, but there might be a final exam where, hey, there's 100 questions, you can miss 10 or more, or sorry, fewer than 10, and if you miss more than 10, then you're going to get a B. And then another thing that students can do, especially with the help of a coach, is calibrate progress, right? So like every little win is a success, and you want to celebrate that, right? Man, I did something differently today. I have a dedicated notebook to AP Bio, which I never had before, and it's helping me keep everything in one place so it's not scattered. That seems like obvious and minor, but that's huge. If you're not doing that, that's a big thing. You want to celebrate that step in the right direction. Right? Or today, I spent an hour studying for a test that's 2 weeks away. I usually wouldn't do that. Right? That's huge. That's a difference maker. Right? And that kind of shift, just like if you start exercising and get into a routine, it's much easier to do than if you haven't for a couple of weeks or more. Something that I think people forget about is how important breaks are. So it is not helpful to do or not great to do like a 3-hour block of studying or 2 hours even with no breaks. Honestly, every 30, 40 minutes, you should be taking a short break, not a phone break where you're going into your well-worn paths of social media or who knows what, or just texting friends. You're getting lost in that, but an active break. So it might be to get a snack. Maybe you do a little stretch, some neck rolls. Going outside or even looking at pictures of nature has been proven to replenish glucose stores. And that's the kind of thing that, like, when you revisit what you were just learning, it actually has been shown to help it cement it more, right? So don't just go long blocks of study. Take breaks and be thoughtful about them. But it's dangerous, right? Because if I feel like, okay, every 30 minutes I can take a break, but then I go on my phone and it becomes a 5, 10, 15, 20-minute break, maybe not the most helpful. So you got to control your environment, make it 5 minutes, maybe no phone or a quick check, and then back to work. And if you are going to use your phone, I mean, one way to do it is put it in airplane mode, use the stopwatch. I use the stopwatch and the timer a lot. And that'll help you learn how to structure your time and how to build in breaks, right? So I've got 45 minutes on the clock. And when that's up, I'm taking a little break. You got to keep healthy boundaries with time, understanding sometimes you just have to put it down, right? Like I went many years ago, I went to law school and I'm a recovering lawyer now. I practiced for a few years and didn't like it. But I enjoyed law school. But what I noticed is that when I was studying and cramming for an exam at like 11 p.m. at night, it was not helpful. It's not effective. The words would start bouncing around. So I'd go to sleep for 3, 4, or 5 hours. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning and I'd study for a few hours then. And that's what worked for me. Unorthodox, but I think at the very least, I knew I was going to get some sleep and not pull an all nighter. And I felt more energetic and able to do the work when I woke up. So, I mean, I think in high school, same thing, right? A lot of students are just working from, morning to night. If you've got an extracurricular or a sport, right, you just don't rest at all. So got to have a time where you're like, man, this is point of diminishing returns. I'm going to put this down. And so engineering environment is just both your like direct study area. So if you're studying in your room, which a lot of students do, you got to have an area that's dedicated to work, not your normal distractions. Can't have the TV on in the corner, can't have the phone right next to us. And honestly, even music, unless it's instrumental, probably not. Most of us are not multitaskers. So we want to make what's hard easy. So like, man, I really don't want to do this essay, but this is kind of the only thing I have in front of me right now. And make what's easy hard. Man, it's really easy to just surf on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, but that's not going to help me achieve my goal. And if I'm disciplined, I can get a lot more done and then do the Snapchat later. I realize I sound very old when I say do the Snapchat. What this does is it decreases the possibility of off-task behavior, and that just lets us accomplish more in our study blocks, right? So it's more effective even though it's shorter and we're taking more breaks. I think it's counterintuitive to a lot of people, but man, the way we study, it makes a huge difference. And even like your larger environment, right? The room, right? Or the library you're in, it's got to be somewhere where it's conducive to your ability to study. So mentioned make what's easy hard. So know your standard, well-worn paths of time wasting and distraction. For most people, it's the phone, but it's not everyone. Some people play video games. It's usually technology, but like, where do you waste time? Where you're not doing anything to enrich yourself, but rather just kind of putting off work, right? Or just rotting our brain, for lack of a better term. How do we change that, right? You got to know, you got to acknowledge it. Like, man, I'm addicted to this, and I'm addicted to my phone. I need to put it aside when I'm studying. That's number one. And there's plenty of helpful like website blockers, apps. Um, I've done things like you can disable JavaScript, and so this makes the internet like very borderline useless. Others just limit your screen time. Others allow you to only open certain apps at a time. So I don't think there's a tried and true method. It's different from every person, but there's a ton of technological tools that you can use to help kind of force yourself into these better on task behavior patterns. So a few of those: freedom, stay focused. I have a lot of students who use limit, waste no time. And there's a bunch of new ones, honestly. Someone mentioned Trello to me recently, which I think is more about it, like scheduling, but lots of good apps, and most of which are free. When we engineer our environment to have a good working area, what we're doing is we're dividing work and play, leisure versus study time. We want to establish healthy boundaries. When we're working, we're just working, right? I'm tutoring and that's what I'm doing. I'm not also doing my taxes or filling out a session report from the day before. I'm just doing what I'm doing. And I'm not, trying to get a lot done at once. Because if I do, both of my activities will suffer. I won't be as effective tutoring or whatever I'm trying to accomplish on the side. We have to have good quality work time, but you also need good quality leisure time, right? A lot of my students, especially, like we're spending all day at school and then at band or in a play or doing sports. And so, like, sports, I guess you consider, and some of those are playtime, but you need some actual leisure time on your own, whether that's to read a book or go for a walk or just even to hang out with friends. So if gaming or social media, which are the usual ones, get in the way, make it harder to access while you're studying. Find a way to do that, whether it's phone in the other room or phone off or a blocker app. And if it's not easy for you to plan, acknowledge it. For a lot of us, it's not easy to plan or think ahead. We just don't want to. It freaks us out, makes us anxious, and it's easier just to focus on today. But if that's the case, think about how can we make it easy and better suited to you. So we can become wiser about procrastination. And I mean, I procrastinate. We all do, right? Sometimes there's just something that I know I could get done early to feel better about it, but I leave it till the last day. What we first need to do, as with all of these skills, is acknowledge the how and the why. Why do I procrastinate? Is it fear of failure? Because that's a big one. Is it simply just like, and related to that, maybe I just don't feel competent with the material. And so I'm putting it off because it's not fun to do something we're not good at, right? Or maybe there's something more fun and I just want to do more fun stuff and just play rather than work. So examine that resistance, whether it's unconscious or you really kind of consciously do it, and be aware of those time sinks. That's when you can develop a plan. So, okay, my head is telling me I'm going to go play a video game instead of studying. What am I going to do when that happens? Build in blocks and plans for yourself. Negotiate, right? Well, if I do this amount now, I can spend an hour playing a video game later. Or if I play a video game now, I'm gonna have to do 4 hours of studying with blocks, of breaks later. So make it either like, geez, I better not do this, or okay, I can do this later. And then for most people, I do this. Don't save the hardest thing for last. Do those first, and then reward yourself with a little bit of break, but also the easier stuff later. It's always a bummer to have finished all your easier tasks and then realize, oh gosh, I've still got the toughest thing. I've got an essay and I've got a group project and I've got a final left to study for. I just knocked out my busy work. Next note is just don't be afraid to seek help. A lot of people, not just students, but a lot of people are afraid, I think, in society these days to ask for help. It's just something that people don't do. But attending teachers' office hours. When I taught in a school and a student came to office hours, I knew that they cared about their performance flat out. That tells me if you attend my office hours, you care. And already, not every teacher might look at it this way, but I certainly looked favorably upon those students and would do everything I could to help them boost their grade or help them in whatever they needed. Emailing, I guess, again, depends on the teacher. I always appreciated it. You don't want to bombard or be annoying, but if you have a question that you don't think you can answer another way and it's not in the syllabus and your peers don't know, email your teacher. Or like if it's for a recommendation, right? You want to get in touch with them. Don't be afraid to do that. Study partners, small groups can be great as long as everyone's there for the right reason. Seek out tutoring. Well, that's my bread and butter, of course. Not everyone needs it, but like if I had known that tutoring was available when I was in high school, I think I would have had a lot of it. It would have helped me a lot. And then search the internet within reason and study guides, syllabus, right? So this is just as you think about final exams, for an example, before you are going to email your teacher about, hey, what's on the test? Well, there's probably a syllabus, and sometimes they even tell you what's on the exam, or at least an outline of the course material. But just don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes we don't know that we need support. A lot of times we know we need it, but don't know how to ask. So part of this, and this is not easy, but trust your gut and identify the right people to ask, right? Maybe there's a counselor. Like there were some counselors at the school I worked at that were amazing. and some that weren't that helpful, right? They were just there just to get a paycheck, but some were amazing. And some teachers, right, that I knew if a student went to them with a question or a problem, I knew that they would approach it with sincerity and give it the right time. So think about which are those teachers, right? Or maybe it's an administrator or a coach, right? Who are the people that I can ask for help? Or maybe it's a friend. And then the right time as well. Um, this is kind of a little bit of an aside, but like for example, when sending job applications, I always sent them on Tuesday, like late morning, because I found that Monday, too early in the week, everyone's just kind of getting back at it. Thursday, Friday, everyone's winding down. Tuesday and Wednesday are great times to reach out for help because people are often just at that point of the week where they're in the zone and they have some time to actually do something other than their main job. But big thing is just don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and ask for help. It can make a big difference, and it's not something you should be ashamed of or hesitant about. Social anxiety can affect it for sure, and that's why it's helpful to kind of understand who are the people you feel comfortable with asking. Something we all need to do when it comes to planning is scheduling out homework and test review time. We'll talk about that and look at like Google Calendar, which is huge for this. But then schedule out breaks and do multiple short study sessions. Those are much more effective for studying than big blocks of time. So it might be feel fine or feel smart to say, I'm gonna take 10 hours on Saturday. I'm just gonna study all 10 hours. Well, you better realize you're not going to be able to just do that and it's not that helpful or effective. So instead, it's like, all right, in my 10 hours, I'm going to have 6 1 hour blocks with breaks built in, right? Even that is a lot, but at least you're not just sitting down for a huge block of time. This is a random April, probably not right for the 2026 month. But one nice thing with executive function coaching is there's so many technological tools now. Some coaches like the big billboard calendar. And so like if it was in person and meeting with a student, maybe would have that up on the wall and start filling that in. I don't mind that. I think it's a good idea. Or the refrigerator, calendar. But these days, like you should have it on Google Calendar. You should have it on your phone, right? This is one thing where the phone is so helpful for. You can also print out your exam schedule, but even if you do that, I'd probably still have everything in my phone, right? I want to know when that final exam is. I'll probably schedule time to study as well. As an executive function coach, I work with mostly high school students, but some like freshmen in college who are just getting started to that transition. And so for them, it's really a weird adjustment to, I don't have to wake up at this time every day. I just have a few classes. How do I arrange my day? When do I go to the gym? When do I study? When do I eat? Right. And so just thinking about all of that a little bit different once you get to the next level of education. But even in high school, I mean, Google Calendar. If you don't have it and use it every day, like you should. Every meeting, everything I've got is in there. Some things are blue for work, some things are red for not work related. Students can do different colors for science and math and history. Can track short-term projects, long-term projects, exams. And then you can see here, I could schedule in, all right, I've got 2 to 3 p.m. going to work on my exam, then take a 30-minute break, right? Because it's not realistic to go straight through, and then another hour on math, and then a break. I promise that taking these breaks, even if it feels like, oh man, this is too much, I promise you it will help you learn and help things stick. Here's what like maybe a college freshman final exam week might look like. So we've got 2 exams on Monday, history and chem, both in the morning. So those are big priorities on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because those are my first 2 tests. But then the next day, right after that long day, I've got math. And after that, I've got English and then Spanish. So you don't want your first Spanish review to be right here. right? It's even this is a little bit risky, but at least here we're starting a couple days before, and then back to English for several hours with breaks built in before that test. And then there's free time too, right? So like 5 to 7 p.m. free, not going till midnight every night. I've got lunch planned in there. Um, Food and play, right? Don't mix them. Uh, this is the kind of thing that a successful student would have just like reminders for everything, right? They've got it either printed or on their phone, but mainly just on their Google Calendar, right? And then you know exactly what's coming and you won't let anything fall through the cracks. That's the biggest thing that happens is students just miss deadlines or run up right against them because they haven't planned properly. All right, home stretch really, the last bit is just talking about how do we learn more effectively, how do we review for exams. So many of us, like I said, have finals and APs coming up. The idea behind taking breaks is the chunk, chew, check strategy, which is Kathleen Kreese's brainchild. And it really is how we learn, right? It's taking a little bit to learn something new, processing that maybe with practice questions or testing of some way, and then we move on, right? And then come back later. We're going to talk about like revisiting and how you can do kind of interval learning. But if we don't take that time to process it, we'll learn this stuff, but we just don't have the short-term memory, right? There's no way that you can actually keep in your active memory all this stuff. So stuff comes in, stuff goes out. Whereas if you break it down and process, it goes to a different part of your brain and is more likely to stick. There are various ways to test yourself, but the main thing is asking questions. Writing down things is also very helpful when preparing for exams. So the question is it better to block study or distribute over time? And we already know the answer is to distribute over time. Blocked practice would be, all right, I'm spending 3 study sessions in a row, several hours on test A, then test B, then test C. Mixed practice is ABC, 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 splitting them up. Those people who blocked right away during the practice, so the top part, which we said is not ideal, during the practice, they remembered 89% and were 89% accurate in their recall. 1 week later, they were 20% accurate. What's interesting about the people who mixed it up is they were much less accurate during practice, but 1 week later, they were actually more accurate than during the practice because it stuck. And they learned something, chewed on it, and then checked it later. So very important not to block study and to mix stuff up. That's why like in a tutoring session or like in a classroom environment, I wouldn't do all the whole time on algebra. We would do, 20 minutes algebra, 10 to maybe work on that in practice, maybe even a short break, and then switch over to grammar, right? Keep things a little bit different so you're not just slogging through the same thing over and over. When we do that, when we do like math, 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 it starts to become passive oftentimes. So getting a great copy of the notes, that's a passive learning. Same with rereading a chapter if you're not marking it up and taking notes. Something we need to do, like we said, is move around, take a walk, reset your processing, and make the learning more active. If it is passive and we're just kind of like here reading, it's not going to stick great. Not going to stick that well. Whereas if you've got pen or pencil moving, you're underlining, you're circling, you're starring, and you're taking notes especially, that's going to stick way more. And that's test taking strategy as well. So we like active, not passive. And that looks like this. I mean, some strategies to test yourself, whether that's for a presentation or for a test, which is kind of the more common thing coming up. Sometimes there's a study guide provided. Even if there is, you might want to make your own, right? Paraphrasing things into like what you think and know is going to show up. Making an outline or organization of chapter information, which could be a concept map or it could just be like bullet notes. If there's some essay questions are going to come up, you could write out pros and cons of positions and things that you can bring back on test day. If there are end of chapter questions, answer them. If there aren't, write your own and answer those. It's not that fun, but it will help you learn better than anything else. And then always look for themes, both in the teacher's instruction, but also in the textbook or your notes or just throughout the class, right? What are the themes that we came back to and that maybe I can hone in on test day? And some people do this. I never did with color coding, but I think it applies to, again, the Google Calendar, but also if you've got like a binder and you're tagging notes, you could have a color for different types of information. One for people, one for historical events, one for theories or concepts, and same for math. Maybe even just like one for geometry, one for algebra, right? Or one for formulas, one for vocab, one for proofs. It doesn't have to be color coded, but you want to do something that's unique to you. That then what it does is it kind of creates this interactive study environment, right? You want to make it different and make it fit your sensibilities. If that's color coding, great. It works for a lot of students. But either way, you want to ask yourself questions. So I've said it a few times and I'll say it again. As you are going back through a chapter for review, right? What is the main topic? Who are the people involved and when? And like, what about that? Or that might the teacher ask me on the test? Where are we talking about? And like, why? What are the things related in this class that might affect it or be affected? And then if you can write out your answers, even if it's just a couple sentences and you force yourself to do that, it makes the same action on test day so much easier and more natural and quicker. So if you ask these questions, write out answers, you're kind of doing the work already that's coming from the test. You're trying to predict what you see and getting like the, not just the analysis done in your head, but down on paper. So very recreatable on testing. And then just be curious and thoughtful about the tests. So if you are uncertain about what's coming up for finals, figure it out. Know your opponent. We need to know from the syllabus what the exam will cover. Make sure that there's a clear picture of the material from your teacher. If there isn't, all the students will be in agreement, like, hey, we don't know what's happening, right? So make sure that someone takes action and gets that knowledge, right? Is it multiple choice? How many questions? Are there short answers? If there are, do I need a thesis or what's the right structure or format? Right? Give yourself all the easy tools to know what the teacher wants so that you're not scuffling when the test comes around. Right? If it's a math test, do I get partial credit? Or if I don't know how to do it, should I just skip it because I'm going to get it wrong anyway? Some math teachers, I always said, if you show your work and get close, or like even just show good work, I'll give you partial credit. You want to know is there a makeup option? Right? That's a bigger thing for college, but there's certainly some like recovery work in high school too, where if I want to, are there extra credit opportunities, or if I don't do how I want to on my midterm or final, is there a way to rectify that? But don't be in the dark about what the exam will cover. Make sure you know exactly what's coming. And a good, thoughtful question you can ask any teacher is, how can I best prepare for your tests? Right? They'll usually be honest. Sometimes the answer is just, well, listen to my lectures and take good notes. At least that tells you that the test should cover what's in the notes, right? And what the teachers talked about. If they say, well, you got to look at the textbook, even if I haven't said it, it might be on the test. That's knowledge too. If you know upperclassmen have already taken the class, you can check on how they succeeded or what was hard. And again, show up to office hours, study halls, review sessions, right? There's power in numbers. And if several people don't understand what's coming on the test, that's an issue. And that tells you, oh, we better find out. And if you go and like, oh, some people actually do have an idea, you can figure out from them any gaps that you have about what the final covers. So get all the intel you can and don't be afraid to ask. What that does is it helps us study the test before we study. So more information, right? Can I go from one section to another? On the SAT and ACT, you can't. Do I get points off for wrong answers? On the SAT and ACT, the answer is no, no guessing penalty. How much information is expected? On the SAT, a lot about algebra. On the ACT, a little bit about everything in all aspects of math. For your AP history test, you need to know broader connections between topics or specific facts. Yes, right? They'll help you relate different things. Again, partial credit, how it's scored, what grade do I need, how important is this test to my overall grade? So go in with knowledge and understand what you are expecting, but also what you need to do. And now just like plan of attack, right? So it's you versus the material and then times in the background. When studying, we said 30-minute blocks. I think up to 50 is okay for most people. This is, I think, the Pomodoro rule of 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And put away all distractions, right? Unless you're writing on your computer, put away the iPod, the laptop, the phone. I mentioned that a vast majority of us, like 99% or more, are not multitaskers. We can't listen to music with lyrics and do work. Some people think they can, right? I think I can, but I'm not sure if I'm right. And so I know that I can't with instrumental music, but some people can listen to classical or jazz as they study, and it helps. We just got to make sure we are limiting distractions and focusing just on the work when we're working and the break when we're breaking. If you find yourself studying for longer blocks than this, it ends up not helping that much more. So like if I do 90 minutes of studying and then a 30-minute break, you would think that'd be equivalent. But as we talked about earlier, doing the blocked study like that doesn't help us retain the information as well as breaking it up. All right, so let's roll in terms of finals preparation. For example, step 1, we're coming up on test day. Let's review our notes. Step 2, review your study guide if you have one. And if you don't, maybe create one. Figure out what you don't know. And that's from everything you've learned that year and then asking the teacher and peers if you need to. 3, review the text. So if there's a big textbook, don't try to read it all again. We're not going to hold it all in one sitting. That's futile. So bring in the visual info, graphs, maps, charts, formulas, right? That might be just a little landmark that will help you recall things on test day. And of course, if there's things you feel stronger on and weaker on, focus on the things you feel weak on from the initial review. Once you go back through, think, oh yeah, I forgot about this stuff. Let me emphasize that in my study. As you are reviewing the text, if you feel like you know it and you're confident and you're like, man, I'm writing this down, but I know this stuff well. I don't have that many questions. Move on. If this is a written response exam, think about what has my teacher emphasized recently? What might they ask me about? What's the thing that like she keeps bringing up in class? Or something that kind of tied into multiple units somehow. After reviewing the text, 4th is review your notes again. This like refresher and like going back is crucial. Think about what do I need more material for, right? Do I not have enough information to really get this down? And then refer back to the text as needed. Right? That's similar for any like standardized test where you can learn the stuff, but if you don't see a question for a few weeks, you're going to forget it. So revisit, see it again. That's how we submit things. And then writing things down. Generate and create to remember. Our working memory is how much we can keep in our brain at one time. And it's not that many things. And so the more you write things down, the more you're putting things into your actual like memory, and not that like passing through memory where it comes in and gets dumped out shortly after. If there's a good study group or a partner you trust, definitely do it. But like I said, make sure they're there for the right reasons and it's not a distraction, right? Or actually hampering your study ability. All right, test day strategies. Some of them are just logistical. Make sure you have what you need, pencils, paper, calculator, if it's allowed. If it's a computer-based test, make sure you know what you can and can't bring, and definitely bring your charger if it's on a computer. And prepare that stuff the night before. Like you don't want to be scrambling to like, oh crap, where's my calculator? Or oh, this pencil's broken. Like get it all set up the week or the day before at least. And then eat right and sleep right leading into test day. Right? What you eat, what you drink, how you sleep, it'll affect how you perform. Taking a test, like some might realize, like if you got out of the test or hard work, you're hungry. Like I definitely feel that way. My parents always made me eat fish, brain food, the night before the test. I'm not saying like have tilapia for breakfast necessarily, but that was something that like even if it was partially just placebo effect, it was okay. I'm getting a good like protein filled healthy meal, and it I don't know, definitely didn't hurt. Assuming you generally eat breakfast, even if you don't, you should probably eat something the morning of a test. We need protein. And I'm always telling people for a Saturday test, like there's an SAT this Saturday, and so I'm telling people tonight's night's sleep is the most important. You can't just go on Friday and say, all right, going to sleep at 9 p.m. Gonna be great. You got to get your circadian rhythms going. Our bodies feel what they went through at least 36 hours previously, so Thursday night's sleep actually affects Saturday's performance, maybe just as much as Friday night's sleep. Final parentheses S tips, study sessions. On your own is fine, but like it's great if you can do it in a group, if you've got, friends you trust or people in the class that you know will be helpful. There is going to be trial and error. This is not an easy thing when you start to do the metacognition and think about what you're thinking, and it's not very natural, right? When I first kind of learned about it, I was like, man, that's pretty revolutionary. But then you got to stop and think, is this actually working? And if not, think about why not and how you can change that, right? So building these checkpoints to make sure that your new systems are working. And if they aren't, be gentle, right? Like that, you don't want to say, oh crap, this isn't working either, right? Same as like trying a new medication, right? Like sometimes it doesn't work and you need to try something different, but that like you have to just kind of think, all right, this is not a failure. This is a learning experience. It's a process. You come from a lens of curiosity. We can't expect to get it right the first time. As we get better at the process, we'll get better at the results and vice versa. We're going to launch one last poll and then Q&A. So any questions you guys have, please also do feel free to reach out to the number below or the email. You see that poll launch. Alpha offers a lot of different things. Like I do mostly tutoring, but we have academic prep and we have executive function coaching and we have a lot of branches, including like counseling. So if you have any questions, just reach out. You're not gonna have any pressure from anyone. And then, like I said, I'm gonna leave it open for questions for a bit. If you do feel like hopefully you enjoyed and got something out of this, but if you feel like you don't have questions, feel free to call it an evening, and thank you for joining. All right, first question is a really good one. It's how does a student gauge incremental growth and know that what they're doing is actually working? It's really tough. I think that there's a couple ways. So if a student's working like on their own without a coach, parents have to be pretty careful, as you probably know, because it's just so easy for the student to get irritated with the parents or just for it to fall on deaf ears. So the student themselves can gauge growth both with results in school, but honestly, it's a feeling. You kind of know, right? Like once you start the metacognition and you realize your well-worn paths of distraction, and you realize, man, this is the stuff that I'm really like not as strong at, or where I have gaps. When you've come up with a process, I have every student I've worked with, just they can feel when it's working, right? And when it's not, it's like, oh man, I'm falling back into my old habits. So it's mostly like if my plan was to limit distractions, but I'm still getting on my phone and not studying for the right amount of time, that tells you everything you need to know. If it's, well, I was supposed to prioritize so I don't procrastinate, but I'm still staying up late the night before every assignment, that's how you know, ooh, whatever I'm doing isn't working. So it is a process, but most of it is just like if you do any one little thing and celebrate that success, you're going to feel it, and the student will know it, and I think the parents will too. Yeah, that was a good question. Oops. I meant to say you're very welcome. Yeah, what I like about executive function coaching is that you really get to know the student and you can really work with them together on just life, right? And like what's stressful and what's coming up that's hard and how can I help? Question from a student. What which I like, those are my favorites. What is the first thing a disorganized student should change to begin doing better? Great question. The first thing is honestly assessing how am I disorganized, right? So is it that like, and also what's the effect? So many of my disorganized students who start that way, and then we kind of try to help fix that. And as a coach, I'm not trying to be a guru and say this is what you do. We're trying to find an actual thing that works for you so that you can take over. Like we're going to start meeting 30 minutes once a week, but the goal is then in a month we start doing 30 minutes every 2 weeks and then spread it out because then you've got. So if you're disorganized and you know it, empty your backpack or whatever it is you take to school and like in your locker and just do like an inventory and think, all right, what are the things I absolutely need to have with me and what are the things I don't? And then I would organize by class, but like you don't want to be overwhelmed. If you've got 7 classes, start with like, all right, well, these are the 2 classes I actually am struggling with. So make sure that those are, there's a folder that's dedicated to Spanish and there's a folder that's dedicated to AP World, and then you can deal with the other classes. So yeah, first thing is honestly like dump that backpack out and like your whole, engineer your whole environment and make sure your workspace and like your actual physical, what you're carrying around is not so burdensome. Start there and then you can expand from that. Another very good student question. Student says, I mean, like, and this is so relatable. I have troubles just caring about school and doing my extra schoolwork at home. Like, there are phases when we care and phases when a lot of us just, like, no matter who we are, find it hard to care. So, first off, like, that's natural. The student says, I sort of procrastinate or just wait until the end of semester and turn everything in. Practice I can do or mental mindset to help me overcome it. Um, I mean, yes, but it's not like a one trick, one size fits all. I think the first thing is what you're doing, which is acknowledging. And a lot of people don't ever do it. They don't say I procrastinate. They just say like, oh, no, I work best when my back's against the wall, which is usually not true. But like I've even said it myself to parents, like, no, I do my best work when I'm like stressed and I have zero time to finish it. But it's like that's a fallacy. That's not real. So what I would say is if you know you procrastinate, the first thing I'd probably do is get the Google Calendar and start putting deadlines and test dates and things in. You have to hold yourself accountable. And step one is actually knowing when the deadlines are, because then hopefully you start to look at that on your phone or on your calendar and you see, wait, this is coming up, and you'll feel bad and guilty even like to not get that work done. But you can't force yourself to care, and I can't force someone to care. And so you have to find your why. So like if we were in a session, I'd say like think about like what motivates you, what are you passionate about, what do you want to do in life? Many people have no idea. I read the book Zen and the Art of Making a Living in my 20s, and that was when I decided, all right, I hate being a lawyer, I'm going to be an educator. uh, so just like, is it because I want to get good grades? Is it because I want to please mom and dad? Is it because I have this internal motivation to do well? Is it because I want to get into this college? Those are all valid reasons for motivation. Think about it, find yours. And I think that's step one to kind of getting yourself in that right direction. But it's easier said than done. And just know that you're not the only one. Everyone procrastinates to some effect. And a reminder that if you have the poll up to submit that, if you don't mind. Another question I have from a student. I'm having a hard time checking my calendar and missing handing in assignments on time. How do we overcome missing the due dates and avoiding handing in? So if the calendar thing isn't working, and sometimes that's a portal at a student calendar, I definitely think like the phone is the thing we have with us all the time. So like Apple Calendar, Google Calendar, and you can change that. Like A, you can color code if it's like a super important deadline or a test, but B, you can change the notification reminders. So like 24 hours before, 48 hours, a week before, 10 minutes before, or multiple. So I think that's number one. is just making sure that you're actually like, even if you don't force yourself to check the calendar, you're getting auto reminders, right? And they're sending them to your email or even to your phone. And then I think missing handing in assignments on time is the most common thing I see. And then it kind of compounds and becomes like a spiral where it's like, oh, now I'm making up work. So again, first thing is acknowledgement. Second is find the calendar way that isn't burdensome for you to check, because part of that is probably, again, subconscious. It's probably fear of failure, or it might just be fear of work and rather would do something fun, or a combination. Think a little bit about it and think about, why exactly am I hesitating or procrastinating and not even checking my calendar when in the back of my mind I know there's probably deadlines coming up. So if you do have other questions, just shoot an email to info@appleruth. Again, my name's Tal. You can request to work with me directly. I'm fairly busy, but as like a test prep tutor or coach, I'd be happy to, and also just answer questions if you have them. But really appreciate you joining and the great questions, and hope you guys have a wonderful night and good luck with the upcoming exam season.